This is Wormwood Scrubs. It's a Category B prison, meaning it holds people convicted of serious offences, including armed robbery and aggravated assault. But behind this wall, and in other Category B prisons across the UK, are dozens of peaceful protesters. People convicted and jailed for acts of civil disobedience, mainly on the issues of climate breakdown and Palestine. Now, it used to be very rare in Britain to jail peaceful protesters, but that changed under the last government, and in particular under former Home Secretary Suella Braverman. She introduced a new law that gives the police the power to criminalise some protest that cause anything more than minor disruption. And she introduced new, harsh maximum sentences for those protesters. She even made it against the law to hold a protest that the police deem too noisy.
What's up, YouTube? Drill Sergeant here. And one of the problems with living in a country that's rapidly mutating from the oldest democracy in the world into a dystopian, fascist nightmare is it's easy to forget. It's easy to forget that thanks to Sith Lord Emperor Orange Palpatine, the lore of the dark side has found its way well beyond our borders. The rise of fascism has become somewhat of a worldwide phenomenon thanks to our fine direction and example. Like waking up to find out that The Late Show with Stephen Colbert is being taken off the air because, like all great art, he was brave enough to call a bribe a bribe. Stephen called out his own company because true artists can be paid but can't be bought because art is truth. And in an authoritarian regime, truth is protest. Art is protest. And this brings us to what's happening in the UK and how the government there is now treating civil disobedience as terrorism and truth as dangerous. Why? It's an important precedent, not just for the people of the UK, but for everyone in America as well, the world as well. And this is about what can happen when the population doesn't follow the government line. You see, rebellion against Britain has existed in Ireland, at least, for over 800 years. And their artists have been speaking truth to power in every one of those 800 years. Think Paul McCartney, U2, the Cranberries, many more of those, quite frankly, with lesser known names, have all made art criticizing and telling the truth, coming down on whatever side they come down on. And now, one of those truth tellers, one of those people being persecuted for being truth tellers, is an Irish language hip hop rap group. I think more drum and bass as far as I'm concerned. But anyway, they're from the North Ireland and they're called Kneecap. Kneecap comes from the nationalist Republican tradition. And no, Republican doesn't mean the same thing there that it means here. Anyway, these are artists that have been fighting for truth, that have been criticized for talking truth, and the government has now come down on them for speaking truth. They're one of the peace baby generation, and that they grew up post 1998. Now, if that doesn't help, allow me to give you just a little bit, a good feel of what this group is all about. One of their first records was called Carta, which in Irish Gaelic means rights. Not only have they made learning Gaelic cool again, which the colonizers hate, by the way, but also they've always been in solidarity with Palestine, like a lot of Irish people, because the colonial history of Ireland would suggest that that's the case. And it's clearly displayed at their gigs. And that's why they're currently facing charges. Yeah. Even before this, they had to go to High Court in London to get arts funding. They sued the government because a Tory minister called Kemi Badenoch, who was minister for the Department of Business and Trade and the Department of Culture, Media and Sports, and is now the leader of the Tory party, personally interfered in blocking money that had been awarded by a separate body because the group didn't believe in the UK. Literally. And what did they do? What did they do, you two, that was so unpatriotic, huh? Well, they unveiled a mural of a police jeep on fire and a tour poster, which had a local politician and Boris Johnson tied to a rocket. Come on, man. Listen, the tour name was Farewell to the Union. And after the Good Friday Peace Agreement, citizens born in the north of Ireland can be British, Irish, or both. That's the law. So Kemi Badenoch was simply being egregious. They have the right to be either or both, okay? Of course, they won their case. But immediately after that, the Arts Council in England announced that those now doing political art may not be eligible for funding in the future. Welcome to the first steps to your authoritarian rule, UK. We'll fast forward. In April, the band played Coachella with the crowds at Coachella shouting, "Free, free Palestine." Good and decent people of YouTube. This is your authoritarian fallout from that time.
A member of the Irish rap group Kneecap has been charged with a terror offence. Liam O'Hanna, who performs under the name Mo Chara, was charged for allegedly displaying a flag of the proscribed organisation Hezbollah at a gig in the O2 Forum in November last year. The Metropolitan Police have said that basically the reason that displaying that flag has been charged in this way is because it violates the displaying of a flag in such a way or in such circumstances as to arouse reasonable suspicion that he is a supporter of a proscribed organisation. Kneecap have insisted they do not support Hamas or Hezbollah and, quote, condemn all attacks on civilians always. The charges come following weeks of intense scrutiny after old footage was dredged up of them shouting "Up Hamas, up Hezbollah" at a concert. They also came under fire for projecting pro-Palestine messages on the stage at Coachella, in which they condemned Israel for, quote, committing genocide against the Palestinian people, and the US government for arming and funding Israel despite their war crimes. In response to the charge, Kneecap issued the following statement on Twitter. 14,000 babies are about to die of starvation, with food sent by the world sitting on the other side of a wall. And once again, the British establishment is focused on us. We deny this offence and will vehemently defend ourselves. This is political policing. This is a carnival of distraction. We are not the story. Genocide is.
Another message reads, "Fuck Israel, free Palestine." I enjoy that. I think that that's a cool message to send. Anyway, currently Mo Chara, Liam O'Hanna, is his real name, has had one court appearance. He was released on unconditional bail until his next appearance on the 20th of August. And here's what his lawyer had to say to a giant crowd full of fans that I'm just sure the British government loved to see, by the way, afterwards.
Over 18 countries, 100,000 fans, 80 concerts, not a single complaint. Around the world, Kneecap are hailed as heroes for speaking truth to power. But in the British court, they've been criminalised. And today, the truth was outed. This was a rushed prosecution following the Coachella performance where Kneecap did not shy away from speaking truth to power. Oppression fears the freedom of expression. But the reality is, Kneecap will stand up for the freedom of expression. They will defend their rights, not only the rights of them, but the rights of artists and people all around the world. It is not new where Irish people have been prosecuted under special powers and terrorism acts. But friends, fans, family of Liam Oak, do not be afraid. We are on the right side of history.
Okay, so at the end of this, I'm going to show Kneecap's powerful and heartbreaking PSA in full if I can get away with it. And you can see for yourself what these guys are all about. But here's the point, YouTube. Here's the point, family. Yesterday was Colbert. Before that, people like Frida Kahlo in Mexico. And in the UK, Kneecap were the latest targets. It's not about the art, YouTube. It's about the protest. Our orange authoritarian virus is turning into a fucking super spreader event, YouTube. And the UK, after Brexit at least, is the new Karen at Walmart who refused to wear her mask in 2020 because God, or Mexicans, or abortion, or human rights. Okay? Whatever the excuse, I'm leaving the fucking store when I see the UK start coughing because they caught that shit, as far as I'm concerned. And it wasn't always like that. People taking part in protests has been a part of life in England, arguably since the peasant revolt of 1381. And then it was against the poll taxes and the feudal system. And then you fast forward 674 years, and the societal change happened all over as a direct result of mass protests. It didn't always happen straight away, fine. But protesters were jailed or even killed. But in the end, they achieved their objectives. We're going to go into a deep dive on this xenophobic and racist Brexit bill that became law to the detriment of everyone except rich authoritarians in part 2. We're going to do that, all right? And we're going to call that video the Brexit Nut Punch. Be prepared for that. But many people were extremely unhappy about Brexit. Brexiters blamed the Remainers. Remainers blamed the government. And this brings us to a man called Steve Bray, another musician. And he was such a thorn in the side to conservative government that they made the exclusion zone around Parliament bigger just to stop him from playing music at them, YouTube. He played the Benny Hill theme a lot. Anyway, when Rishi Sunak announced a general election in the pouring rain from 10 Downing Street, he did it to the song Things Can Only Get Better by D. Ream.
Now is the moment for Britain to choose its future, to decide whether we want to build on the progress we have made or risk going back to square one with no plan and no certainty. Earlier today, I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament. The King has granted this request, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July about what we can do in the future. On the 5th of July, either Keir Starmer or I will be Prime Minister. He has shown time and time again that he will take the easy way out and do anything to get power. If he was happy to abandon all the promises he made to become Labour leader once he got the job, how can you know that he won't do exactly the same thing if he were to become Prime Minister?
Now, he also has had to go to court to defend his right to protest. Let me know when this sounds familiar to you, America, USA. Let me know when this sounds familiar to you, YouTube. He was accused of failing without reasonable excuse to comply with the direction given under the Police Reform and Social Responsibility Act of 2011 in regards to prohibitive activities in Parliament Square. Body cam footage saw him tell the officers that their map was out of date, which it was. So he was found not guilty. But the fact that government pursued this in a court of law, it shows how dangerous just speaking out was becoming and is now. This has been happening for a while. The right-wing press had already started labeling judges enemies of the people. Stop me when this becomes familiar to you, YouTube, America. The last conservative government with Home Secretary Suella Braverman introduced the Public Order Act of 2023, which added more restrictions around protests, orders banning people from attending protests, controlling their associates' movements, activity, and expansion of stop and search powers in the new offenses, including causing serious disruption and completely banning certain protests altogether. Familiar? Stop and frisk? This is where we are. The justification from that government was the disruption caused by climate change protesters. These are nonviolent climate protesters that can now be given 10-year sentences. I'll say this and you know what I mean. Dystopia warning, obviously. A Labour Party that most people expected would repeal the 2023 Act are now going to charge protesters with terrorism for taking part in a non-violent protest. The current Labour Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, said that Palestine Action, a protest group who take part in acts of non-violent disobedience, are going to be listed as a prescribed organization, which in the UK means they will be treated as terrorists like ISIS, Al-Qaeda, or Boko Haram.
This is Wormwood Scrubs. It's a Category B prison, meaning it holds people convicted of serious offences, including armed robbery and aggravated assault. But behind this wall, and in other Category B prisons across the UK, are dozens of peaceful protesters. People convicted and jailed for acts of civil disobedience, mainly on the issues of climate breakdown and Palestine. Now, it used to be very rare in Britain to jail peaceful protesters, but that changed under the last government, and in particular under former Home Secretary Suella Braverman. She introduced a new law that gives the police the power to criminalise some protests that cause anything more than minor disruption. She introduced new, harsh maximum sentences for those protesters. She even made it against the law to hold a protest that the police deem too noisy. Among those currently held in UK jails are 5 Just Stop Oil activists, serving sentences between 4 and 5 years. Meanwhile, 2 other protesters who threw soup on the glass of Van Gogh sunflowers have just been sentenced to 20 months and 2 years in prison. Now, whatever you think about their protest, they did no damage to that painting. All of these sentences were handed down by the same judge, Christopher Hare, but Judge Hare isn't always so harsh. There was the man who crashed his car into the gates of Downing Street and was found in possession of indecent images of children. Hare only gave him a suspended sentence, meaning he went free. Then there was the case of the 2 brothers who assaulted an off-duty police officer, leaving him needing titanium plates in his cheek and one eye socket. The brothers who launched this unprovoked attack were the sons of one of Britain's richest property tycoons. Hare gave them suspended sentences. Then there was the former police officer who had sex in a patrol car with a drunk woman he'd offered to take home. He was also only given a suspended sentence by Hare. Hare has said the long sentences he hands down to peaceful protesters are justified because it's the will of Parliament. Meanwhile, Conservative Attorney Generals successfully push for the courts to restrict the rights of protesters to argue their case in court. You see, protesters used to be able to make the case to the jury that their actions were proportionate and reasonable. It was then left to the ordinary men and women of the jury to decide whether they agreed. But no, under the Conservatives, judges largely removed that right. Now, protesters who try to explain their motives to a jury are being punished with jail.
Yeah. You see, YouTube, this happened after the group protested footage from RAF Breeze Norton in America. That's like the Joint Air Force Base San Antonio and Dobbins in Georgia, right? And they used red spray paint to spray the engines of 2 military Airbus Voyager planes. And the authorities called this terrorism or counterinsurgency. Let us be clear, YouTube, painting planes is not terrorizing. It is not terrorizing. It's not violence. It's peaceful protest. It hurts nobody. And let's get something else clear right now. This is not anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is the bigotry and hate towards anyone who is Jewish for being Jewish. It is not anti-Semitic to want to free your people oppressed by the government of Israel, which is not a state comprised of only Jewish people. By the way, racists, how about them apples? Calling protesters who are opposed to genocide anti-Semitic is a MAGA turkey call, and you're gobbling it up. At least, so says our Jewish staff member. I didn't make that up myself. Anyway, before this, you probably would have been charged with civil disobedience, criminal damage, trespass, etc. Not as a counterinsurgent. So people like Lord Peter Hain, who protested the apartheid in South Africa by disrupting a rugby tour of the all-white South African team in the late 60s, he wasn't jailed. But now he probably would be if he undertook those same actions today, the same ones he took back then. Even though this campaign helped eventually stop apartheid and legal racial segregation by a minority white government. As The Guardian said in its editorial, if red paint is terrorism, then what isn't? You tell me, YouTube. UK, this is for you. I'm sorry we gave you the virus, but should anyone be looking at a 14-year maximum jail sentence for being a member or showing support for a group that spray-painted a plane? Huh? People, after Palestine Action was prescribed as a terrorist organization, again people protested. They had signs supporting Palestine Action, which is now a criminal offense. The police arrested 29 people, and they could each face up to 14 years in prison for holding a sign. Naturally, Americans want to scoff at that. It's our natural reaction. We have a First Amendment right to protest, after all. And though Trump is getting increasingly aggressive, nobody's been labeled a terrorist. Well, no white people have been labeled a terrorist just yet. But we have plenty of politicians working hard to restrict and punish that First Amendment right. In today's world, the bloated apricot in office is using the National Guard and the Marines as the police to control protests. We have book bans, a major revision of history in certain states, Doge having access to private data, the violent kidnappings by cowards working for ICE, and face masks. Remember, police and other such agents are the enforcers of fascism, not law. Will you remember that? And in the UK, for you, the police aren't doing much better. According to one article in April, eyewitnesses described the Metropolitan Police as being violent after 3 protesters were arrested outside BBC offices in central London. Police were seen hitting and punching protesters. And in 2023, 27% of the UK police office was referred to a misconduct hearing. That's more than a quarter of the police office. Like, let's remember that's probably lower than the actual amount. So, as the fascism drum beats on, travelers to America are now required to provide all social media usernames dating back to 5 years, and they're turning travelers away for any sign of protest. Even an AI photo of J.D. Vance will get you sent home.
Thousands of young Irish people work in the US on J1 visas. I've done it myself, a happy summer in Boston many years ago, and generally it's a very positive experience. But things have changed drastically under US President Trump with the recent authoritarian announcement that students will have to hand over social media accounts. We're watching a major incursion on freedom of expression, unthinkable in a Western democracy. This week, a young Norwegian tourist detained by ICE at Newark Airport and sent back to Oslo. Why? He had this meme on his phone, Minister, a meme depicting Vice President J.D. Vance as a baby. I mean, extraordinary, extraordinary that a young person with this amusing meme on their phone depicting a public person, that this would be used as an excuse to detain him for 5 hours and then deport him back to Oslo. So, Minister, I welcome the Taoiseach's commitment to raise this serious issue with the US ambassador.
Since when did fascism become our national export? We got tariffs on anything coming in. Is this what we're okay with? At least it isn't true for the UK yet. So, America, and hey, you too, UK, what are we going to do about it? We stand up. We tell them loudly, no more. Keep those protests going. Defy them. Disobey them. Do not obey in advance. Show up in numbers too big to jail. Then you keep voting against fascist ideology and keep educating anyone you can. It does not have to be this way. It does not have to be this way. One way to keep that fight going is to join organizations. One of them is Drill Sergeant Special Ops Team. Would you like to get vetted thoroughly and do things that help people in need during this fascist regime's takeover of our democracy? Help sustain democracy and lives. Right down there is the email. Email me there. You will get vetted thoroughly, and you'll no longer have to use that Gmail again. We're not dumb, but that's for everybody. Another way, you could become a member on our Patreon. Another way, go to Sons of Liberty and become a member of their Discord. There's protests going on. There's things happening behind the scenes. But most importantly, we're not shutting up, shutting down, and we're not scared. There's more of us than there is of them. And when things have to go nonviolent, we're not scared of that either. There's more of us than there is of them. I'd rather be organized before that happens. What say you? As a matter of fact, we're not very far from the Colbert Show, from the Late Show. I'm not as good. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is we're speaking truth to power, and we don't know how long we'll be on YouTube for doing so. So go to Twitch. Even if you don't watch it, join, subscribe, get the numbers up. Ensure that we have another way to reach people with the truth, with the history that they won't teach you, with the vision that they're blinding you to in this authoritarian regime. Go to Twitch, check it out. Herb Digital is there. Got some good live shows, and we got more people coming. Whatever they're not showing you, we promise we will. Have a good evening. Sleep well, because tomorrow we fight. Ground News has very quickly become one of my most prized resources, my go-to even, because I get to find out what stories are not covered by the blind spot feature, which I love. But not just the blind spot feature. Any of these stories that I bring up, I can see what either side is saying about it. I can also see who's paying for those headlines. It tells me who owns the publication, which also lets me know who they're writing it for. Many times, none of that is for us. But understanding the context helps us understand the story. Ground news is absolutely one of, if not the best way to know that you've gotten every side of a story and that there's not enough spin in the world that could have you misinterpret it. Hey, yeah, you. Before you click away to watch someone unbox a tactical toothbrush, let's talk about something real. Political Drain isn't just another content mill. We're a digital front in a very real war. Not with bullets, but with ideas, with action, and with solidarity. We pair urgent news with critical education. And we build community around actual resistance, not the hashtag kind. The kind that moves. But here's the thing. None of this is free. It isn't. Behind every video is time, labor, research, and some weird guy asking if we're going to pay the hosting bill. And yeah, some of that money goes to things we can't necessarily say out loud. If you know, you know. Let's just say our special ops aren't Call of Duty LARPers. They're people making real moves to protect, uplift, and organize. You're not just funding a channel. You're funding a resistance network in a world where capital still calls the shots. Unfortunately, in a system built on artificial scarcity, even mutual aid has a price tag. And if we want to grow, if we want to win, we need your help. We need your help. So if you've got even a few bucks to spare, toss it our way. It's not for ads. It's not for merch drops, but for people making moves in the shadows so others can do it in the light. It's just us and you. So fund the mission, fund the fight, fund the future, because nobody's coming to save us. We save each other. That's how this works. Follow us on all these things you see here, and our link tree is in the description. Maybe even get some merch.